This is Counterpoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Allen. We're back with our current events panel with a lot to unpack with the latest headlines. We'll take a look at the rising cost of food, especially beef, and what that means for you and your family. We'll cover the latest sponsors to pull out of the Toronto Pride Parade and what the City of Toronto is doing as a result. We'll discuss the federal government's two controversial bills, C2 and C4, which impact your privacy. And finally, we'll cover the Government of Ontario's proposed legislation to manage alleged out-of-control spending at some school boards. Is this really a widespread issue, or is this just a power grab? Lots to get through, and join me now is Michelle Simard, lawyer and privacy cybersecurity specialist, and Mike Patton, political commentator. Mike, Michelle, good morning. Glad to have you back on, or I should say good day, rather. It's not morning anymore. Great to have you on. Let's jump right in because we always run out of time on this show. And I want to start by talking about what's happening in the province of Ontario. This is being called a power grab. Mike, why don't you start us off on this one?
Well, the province of Ontario, provinces control overreaching responsibility for education in their jurisdictions, and they farm most of that responsibility out to local school boards. What has happened with this piece of legislation is the provinces are now, certainly Ontario, is making themselves able to take over management of local school boards in a much more easy fashion.
So if there's, and here they're using the allegation that there's misspending. I mean, and there are some egregious examples for certain, like trustees going to Italy on certain trips. But Michelle, are those just outliers, or is this so commonplace that it necessitates giving the provincial government or them granting themselves greater authority?
Well, I think it's twofold. So one is, yes, there are egregious examples, but at the same token, we have a government which we elect, and school boards aren't, right? And at the end of the day, if we hear stories like this that come through the media and the news outlets saying, hey, school board people went to Italy to go buy some art for school, people are like, are you kidding me? And what do they expect from our elected officials, right? I'm not a big fan of government interference, but what would we expect from, because there's no oversight. So we would expect our elected officials to come in and say, we're looking at this and this is what we're going to do and we're going to try to fix this. So I think we're kind of all in agreement there because that's just the way the system is. Now, is it a power grab? Possibly, but I think Paul Calendar, what he's doing, which is the Minister of Education, I think he's being very balanced here. What he's saying is, and hopefully that continues, is going to hire an independent third party to do some oversight. So a little bit of an audit to see what's going on. And if there's a pattern that he sees, then at that point, I think the ministry is going to come in. So it's a little bit of a wait and see approach. I think what he's doing is that he's got to look into this, because if he doesn't, parents and people are going to be like, this is where my taxpayer dollars are going, because these people have out of control spending, which probably is not the case, but there's some who just took advantage, and we need to fix that. So I think that's where it's at. I think this conversation is going to be a continuing conversation throughout the months and probably at the end of the year when we get some more results.
Okay, and while certainly, these outlying examples, and maybe they're a little bit more commonplace than any of us would like them to happen. Now, while certainly these examples, like the trip to Italy to procure art for schools, is ridiculous, and certainly was a silly, ridiculous, costly decision. This to me seems a bit heavy-handed, because don't forget, school boards are they're represented by trustees, and who elects the trustees? Well, it's the parents, it's the citizens, it's the taxpayers. So if the parents and the voters are upset, then they will toss the bums out, as they say. We don't have another oversight level for the provincial government when they make very ethical issues. And don't forget that government is under ethical investigation. There's no another level of oversight. It's simply an investigation is done, investigations are done, and then the result is the result. Where was this kind of heavy-handed approach when parents are being banned from speaking at these public meetings, at school board meetings? The government says nothing. Provincial government says nothing. So I think there's maybe a nefarious agenda here. I don't know. But I don't trust the Minister of Education when, on one hand, they're completely ignoring a lot of democratic egregious examples that are happening in school boards. But yet here, on these one-offs here and there of a crazy spending, they're saying, oh, we'll take care of it. Mike, final word, 10 seconds or so.
One of the main targets of this is the Ottawa Public Board, and it's because that board cannot manage a lemonade stand. They may be very good educators, but just because you're a good educator doesn't mean you can manage things properly.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll be right back.